welcome to the brand new podcast from Loughborough University, Let's Talk Loughborough. We are bringing you interesting interviews from staff and students across the university, so stay tuned to find out more. Hi, I'm your host Jemima. I'm a second year student here at Loughborough studying English with Digital Humanities.
And I'm Soph, I'm Jemima's co-host. I work in the internal communications team at the university, looking after student and staff comms.
So we are approaching exam season, and we thought it'd be lovely to have a chat with a few people who will be giving us advice about studying and looking after your well-being during exam season. First up, we have Lydia Leney, who is a Wellbeing Adviser at the university, and Nadi, who is a Graduate Management Trainee, currently working in academic registry. As always, we start with an icebreaker question. So Lydia and Tara, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever given?
I mean, mine's probably a bit of a classic, and that is don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something, because I think it's a great way to learn, and it's helpful in education, it's helpful at work, it can be helpful in relationships, friendships. You know, if you don't understand something with someone else, you know, ask about it, and it helps to build those kind of meaningful connections. So I think that for me, that's a really useful bit of advice.
I'd say for me, it's to put things into perspective. If we're talking about exams, just remember that this one exam is not going to make or break your degree. Even if you don't get the grade that you wanted, it's really not the end of the world. And you know, that can carry you through life as well. So nothing failing isn't as catastrophic as you might think, or perhaps not doing as well as you thought is not as catastrophic as you might think. And I find that thinking that way really helps to take the pressure off, especially around things like exams or job interviews or anything else that's quite stressful.
Yeah, I like that piece of advice. I think especially failing is seen as a really bad thing, but realistically it could be really, really good for you to fail once, because it means you're going to work harder and you're going to bounce back up from the mistakes. And it is a good learning experience for you, even though it might hurt at the beginning.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think sometimes it's good to fail to learn from your mistakes.
So we asked some questions on Instagram, and remember that you can follow Loughborough University's Instagram to keep up to date with everything happening on campus. And we always post our question boxes ahead of every episode so you can get your questions answered. So I'm going to ask Lydia first, how to combat stress during the exam period.
I think a really important thing is trying to incorporate good practices right from the beginning when it comes to your revision plan, so that we know that helps to reduce stress, anxiety, potentially burnout. A big part of that is breaks. We talk about breaks a lot when it comes to revision. A lot of people feel that having breaks is a luxury and kind of feel guilty about that. But actually, it's a really critical part of your learning. It's when your brain has time to digest the information that it's absorbed. Often you might find that actually you find the solution to a problem you've been dwelling on, or you come up with a new idea when you're actually having a break from your revision or from your work. A technique that quite often gets recommended is the Pomodoro Technique, and that's a really positive way to incorporate breaks into your work day. Set yourself a timer for 25 minutes, then have a 5-minute break, and repeat that throughout the day. That method's been shown to increase focus and productivity, and you can adapt it to work for you. You know, different courses, often creative subjects, sometimes people need to work a little bit longer than 25 minutes, and everyone's a little bit different, so it's okay to adapt these things as they make the most sense. One bit of advice with exam stress I think is really valuable also is actually rewarding yourself when you do something, kind of when you achieve something. Having something to look forward to in the day can just really boost you and give you that additional bit of motivation. And it can be absolutely anything. You know, the reward might be you're eating your favorite food at the end of the day, or it might be having a chat with one of your friends. It doesn't have to be anything massive, but it's just having that positive thing that you can look forward to there. And another thing that is always important is making sure you still prioritize your physical health. So making sure you're eating healthily, drinking enough water, trying to stick to a regular sleep routine as well. Ideally getting a little bit of exercise, even just a short walk, could be really, really beneficial. So those are probably my kind of top tips for exam stress.
Amazing, some great top tips there.
So I'm asking Tara now, how should first years approach these exams, not having any experience with online exams? And obviously the change from A-levels to university is quite big as well sometimes.
So firstly, I would say just make sure that you prepare like a normal exam. Even though it's online, you still need to get into that exam headspace, and to ensure that you revise as you would a normal exam, because even if it's an open book exam, you may not have enough time to be reading the material as you're writing it. The second and perhaps most important thing, that way to prepare, is to know what sort of exam you're taking. So there's two sorts of online exams at Loughborough. There's the 1A exams, which are the longer window exams. So that means you'll have 23 hours to start, complete, and upload the examination. Each paper will have an expected amount of time that you are supposed to spend on it, and possibly a word count, and you are expected to keep within that time. So if your paper says you've got 2 hours, you are supposed to spend 2 hours on the paper and not 23 hours on the paper. You've also got the 1B, which is a short exam window, and you must begin, complete, and upload the exam paper within the time period. So if it's 2 hours, then you have 2 hours to complete it. You'll be given an additional 30 minutes to upload your exam paper. That sounds straightforward enough, but we would advise that you practice uploading your paper as well, and make sure you know how and where to upload your exams, so you are not stressing or panicking at the last minute. It's also a good idea to make a note of where you can get help if you're stuck during your exams. If you're struggling, as in you can't find the paper, you can't access Learn, there is an exams helpline that will help you if you just give them a call as well. A big part of it as well is academic misconduct. So even if the exam is open book, you do not want to get caught out by academic misconduct. So make sure that you're referencing according to the way your department asks you to reference, and make sure that you're not like lifting like quotes directly from sources as well, because that will also count as academic misconduct. On the day of the exam, again, prepare normally. So have a good breakfast, make sure you've got water, make sure that your setup is quiet, that you've got good internet access, because the last thing you want is for your neighbor to start streaming on their PS5, and that affects your internet and you can't access the exam. So make sure that you are in a space where you have good internet access and where it's quiet. Also keep track of the time as well. Again, in an open book exam, if you're reading sources, it's easy to underestimate the amount of time it takes to read a page of text, but make sure that you keep either an alarm or a stopwatch, just to make sure that you have enough time.
Some great advice there. And also just to say to people who are listening, we have an exam support webpage which will have all of these details, all of this information in one place for you to access. But those are really, really helpful tips, especially for those who've not taken online exams before. Jemima, just to circle back quickly to what Lydia was saying about the Pomodoro Technique, is that something that you've ever tried? Because I know I used it a lot when I did exams, but I didn't know if you'd done that when you'd been taking exams or revising.
So my course doesn't actually have exams, so I'm quite lucky with that. I'm a 100% coursework student, but definitely when doing like courseworks, I do the Pomodoro Technique because I have a really short attention span. So reading a long bit of text in English over 5 hours is not ideal. So I'd rather break it up and then go get a walk, or have like a drink of water. Usually if I'm like working in my room in our house, I'll walk downstairs, have like a 10-minute chat with my housemate, then walk back up to do work, and be really disciplined in that way. But yeah, the Pomodoro Technique is a really good technique. Like everyone I know who's used it. I know there's like an app as well called Flora. So it's like you get a treat each time you complete a 25-minute section. So me and my house, because we're also course mates, which is quite lucky, we always use the Flora app, and we like to see who can get the most flowers in one coursework sitting.
Nice, a bit of healthy competition. I like it. I like it. Lydia, another question that we got asked was how to kind of challenge unhelpful thinking. So kind of getting yourself worked up, panicked, or getting really anxious about exams and revising. Is there anything you can suggest that will help with that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's a few different techniques you can use for managing kind of unhelpful thinking. One that we quite often use in our team is using the THINK acronym. So basically what you're doing is you're going through and asking yourself questions about that thought. So T, is the thought true? H, is the thought helpful? I, is the thought inspiring? N, is the thought necessary? And K, is the thought kind? So you go through and you ask yourself each of those questions about the thought that's kind of becoming unhelpful for you. And if the answer to one of those is no, then you try and think of what's another way of looking at it. So for example, if the answer to is the thought helpful is no, what would be a more helpful thought? And try and think, kind of focus on that new thought, and just kind of try and move towards that more positive way of looking at the situation, and that can be really useful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to have like good talk when you're thinking about yourself, and like good thinking when going into exams. And I know for me personally, if I get into my own head a lot, then it means I'll do like not as well in the exam, because I was too focused on what I was actually doing instead of the exam and what it was asking from me. Moving on to the next question for Tara. What does open book really mean?
So an open book exam is where you're allowed to use resources such as books, articles and lecture notes during your exam. One thing to be aware of is that some exams may have stipulations as to what resources you can use. So it can be, you can have like notes, but they have to be on one side of A4, for example. So make sure you just read the paper just to make sure that you have the right notes. And yeah, that's essentially what an open book exam is that you are allowed to utilize resources during your exam. So that's probably the biggest difference between traditional exams, where you often have to rely on your memory, and online open book exams, is that you do have access to resources to help you. That being said, it's still good to make sure that you revise beforehand, especially with when it comes to digital texts. Some may not be accessible during an exam if a lot of people are trying to access the same text at the same time as you are. Yeah, so again, I would always emphasize making sure that you are well prepared before the exam anyway.
A lot of people have the misconception that just because it's open book means that everything's going to become much easier. Obviously, it's there to help, but also you should not rely on the open book, because you'll find yourself spend ages and ages reading your notes instead of actually writing your essay, which I found. My next question for Lydia is, where to get support from the university, and what support does the university offer? So group sessions, self-help, and long-term well-being issues, etc.
The university offers a range of different types of support for students. And this year, within the Student Wellbeing and Inclusivity Service, we've released a suite of group sessions which have been tailored towards the support needs of our students, and that are accessible throughout the year, on different themes, kind of depending on kind of what's going on at that time. They're running both online and face-to-face, and one of the topics coming up is around coping with exam stress, which is obviously relevant at the moment. And that includes looking at mindful techniques. It includes managing stress levels on the lead up to exams, on the day of exams, and after the exams as well. And many of those techniques are applicable kind of to other stresses in life as well. There's a web page which has the details of all of the group sessions that we're offering, and students can book directly via the web page. We also have a section on the website on self-help, including booklets on stress, and Mind and NHS self-help guides are there as well. And there's a page there specifically about undertaking open book exams, in fact, and ideas on compiling resources there. So there's sort of a range of information that certainly would be relevant. For students who are experiencing more long-term difficulties relating to their well-being, they can request an appointment with an advisor by completing a referral form. So when they complete the referral form, it then gets triaged by a team within Student Wellbeing and Inclusivity, and they're invited to book an appointment with the most appropriate service to meet their needs. So whether that would be with a wellbeing advisor, with the mental health support team, or with the counselling service.
No, that all sounds really good. It's good to know there's lots of different options for people depending on what they need. Tara, one for you. Someone has asked if they have an in-person exam but they test positive for COVID, what is the procedure that they need to go through?
So very, very few students should have in-person exams because the subject requires it for their qualification. But if you do have one and you test positive, you should follow the normal NHS and government guidelines when it comes to self-isolation. The mitigating circumstances process is built for situations like this. So if you do have a positive test, take a screenshot and let your department know. And the likely outcome is that you will be able to resit as a first attempt in the special assessment period or in the next academic year. But essentially, we will make sure that no student is at a disadvantage because they tested positive for COVID-19 when they had an exam and missed an exam as a result of that.
Another question, Tara, along the route of like mitigating circumstances, and we've had questions about how to apply for mitigating circumstances, and if you have applied, will this come through in time for exam?
So you can apply for mitigating circumstances through the student self-help portal, which you can access, and that includes all your information about your students. You'll be able to upload digital evidence if you have any. In some cases, evidence is not required. So, but in terms of whether the claim will come through in time for exams, the panels normally meet at the end of the semester, so it's unlikely to come through before you sit your exam. But that doesn't mean that it isn't actually worth putting in the claim, or that your claim won't be successful. It's just that it won't come in time for your exam, most likely, because the panels meet at the end of the semester.
Thank you. And then I have a question for Lydia. Someone's asked, how do you support a friend who may be struggling in exam season?
I mean, one thing that's really important to recognise is that you don't have to solve other people's problems. Sometimes it is just a case of being there for someone that can be enough. Exam time is a really stressful time for everyone, and so making sure that you're looking after yourself and not compromising your own well-being is really important. I would encourage, if you have a friend who's struggling, let them know about the support that's available for them at the university. If you do have the time, you could offer to attend one of the group sessions with them to support them. You might find it's helpful for you as well, so that's a bonus. Something as well, if someone's struggling in any situation, it's a good idea to ask them actually how they want to be helped, because we all deal with stress differently. Some people like to talk about it. Other people would prefer to be distracted from that stress. So it's a good idea to have that conversation to see kind of what actually would be useful for them. Again, if you do have the time and you're not kind of feeling overwhelmed yourself, it might help to set up a revision group for a few of you, so that you've got company, and that can help with motivation as well if you're meeting other people to revise, or organise to have a break together. So we've talked about how important breaks are, so organise something nice to do that can distract you all from work, and that can be something really positive you can do to help other people and to help yourself.
That's great advice. I think it is, as you say, important to look after yourself, but if you are also able to support your friends, it's a really nice thing to do. And I think a group session is a nice idea as well, especially as people like Jemima who might live with their course mates as well. That works out perfectly. You're already in the same space. So I think that's a great idea. Tara, we have just a couple more questions for you. And the first one being, where can people access past exam papers?
So you should be able to access past exam papers on the relevant module page on Learn. If you're unable to find the past exam papers, then just then I would recommend getting in touch with the module leader, as they should be able to point you in the right direction.
Tara, so could you please explain what the no detriment policy is? Because I don't know what it is, but also if it would be introduced again.
So the university introduced a no detriment policy when the COVID-19 pandemic first broke out, to ensure that no student would be disadvantaged as a result of the pandemic. So safety nets are currently being reviewed at the moment, and they will be updated before exams. The university has committed to calculating 2 degree classifications for students who were doing Part B in semester 2 of the 1920 academic year. So what this means is the university will calculate 2 degree averages for these students, and they will be awarded the higher percentage. The university does also recognise that some students are still currently being impacted by the pandemic, and they are committed to doing their best to ensure that no student will be disadvantaged and will be able to achieve their best result. So the short answer is that yes, safety nets are still in place, but they are being reviewed at the moment.
Thank you for that. It's really good to hear that we'll never be disadvantaged because of this pandemic. And then my final question for you, Tara, is do we have to reference in our online exams?
So in online and traditional exams, you don't have to produce a full reference list like you would in coursework. I think that will be an awful lot to remember off the top of your head, but you should cite any literature according to your disciplinary norms. So the usual way in exams would be the author and the date. So if it was Thomas Smith wrote a book in 2019, it would be Smith 2019 in brackets. But do check with your department as to how they'd like you to reference. Another thing to remember as well is that make sure your revision notes are in your own words, especially if you are looking at sources as you are like writing your exam. It's all too easy to lift a quote verbatim, but if you do that, that will be academic misconduct. Also make sure that you are not committing collusion with your friends. So I know that when I did my online exams, I deliberately left all the group chats that I was in just to make sure that I just wasn't being firstly I wasn't distracted, and B, just to make sure that I wasn't inadvertently colluding, because if you are discussing the answers in any way, that could lead to your answers being similar, and then both of you will be pulled up for an academic misconduct charge, which you don't want. So yeah, just bear those tips in mind when preparing. But yeah, in a nutshell, you don't have to reference as you would in a piece of coursework, but you should still cite your sources where you can.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tara. That's very helpful information.
So Lydia, what are your top tips for exam anxiety?
Okay, so if you are finding yourself experiencing the signs of anxiety during the exam period, there are some strategies that can be useful. Breathing exercises is something that we often talk about for managing the anxiety, and they can be really helpful for reducing symptoms. What's involved is really taking some time to slow down and focus on your breathing. A really simple exercise is just to breathe in for 3 slow counts and breathe out for 3 slow counts, and then repeat that 10 times. Making breathing exercises or relaxation techniques part of your daily routine can help with general anxiety, but it also means that you can use those techniques more easily when you do feel overwhelmed or particularly anxious. You're effectively training your mind and you're training your body to respond to those techniques. So that's why practice is important. Muscle relaxation as well is a really useful technique for managing the tension that we can hold in our bodies when we're anxious. A really simple version of that is just working through your body, just tensing and then relaxing your muscles and just really allowing yourself to experience that sensation of your body relaxing. Often when we're stressed and we're anxious, we don't realize where we're holding tension, and just being conscious of that and learning to let that tension go is a really useful thing to learn to do. Mindfulness is something that's really useful for anxiety as well, and just a few minutes of practicing mindfulness in a day can make a big difference. The NHS website has a section on mindfulness. There's loads of resources out there. There's loads of apps you can use. Headspace is a really good starting point, and that's one that's very popular. And just a really simple thing, you know, if you are finding yourself feeling overwhelmed, feeling symptoms of anxiety, give yourself a break, kind of go and get a little bit of fresh air, go and have a drink of water, and take a few minutes before coming back to your revision, so that you kind of have that space to recover from that anxiety and then start again.
Those are some great tips. Thank you so much for sharing them with us, and hopefully the people who are listening can implement implement them in their daily lives and their exam practices as well. So thank you both Lydia and Tara for joining us today for discussions about exam anxiety, how to deal with exams, whether you're in your first year or final year, and how to cope during this exam season.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us. And yeah, good luck with your exams, everyone.
LSU Advice is a free, confidential and non-judgmental service that is independent from the university. The team of advisors are there to help all students and doctoral researchers with a multitude of university processes. These include mitigating circumstances, academic misconduct, complaints, disciplinaries, and appeals. If you feel like you would like advice through a university process or you're just unsure, please get in touch with them via email lsuadvice@lsu.co.uk.
Okay, so we are now joined by 3 more graduate management trainees. Welcome James, Ruqayya and Abbie. And we've asked them to join us today because they've all finished university recently and they've all gone through exam season. So I'm sure they'll have great advice for you all. So first of all, I'd like to, again, tell us your name and what department you guys work in.
Thank you, Jemima. So yes, my name's Abbie, and I'm based in the change team at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Hello, I'm James. I'm based in the Student Operations and Records office, so just behind the Students' Inquiries desk in the Whitman building.
Hi, my name is Ruqayya. I'm currently in the finance department.
So my first question for everyone is, how do you motivate yourself to revise?
Gosh, what a question. It's taking me right back. I feel like the first thing that comes to my mind is like allowing yourself to have fun. So motivating yourself to work hard with the end goal of having something to look forward to. So I remember I would arrange things for the weekend or even the evening, just knowing that I'd be seeing people would motivate me to work and know that then I could put my laptop down and not think about it for the rest of the evening.
I'm quite kind of goal orientated, so I worked out what mark I needed to get in the exam or in the assessment, and then worked out what I needed to do on the kind of marking rubric to get that mark. And I found that was enough for motivation. But I think if I kind of just needed to do well, I wouldn't feel motivated. But if I knew I need to get a 63 in this exam, or I need to get a 70, that kind of gave me enough of a kind of a realistic goal that I could aim for.
And for me, in order to motivate myself, I would sort of just look at the topics that I found more interesting, and I'll start from there. So that way it's sort of like a bit more fun and less daunting going into it. And I think, also having like a study partner, I think that can really help motivate you, just having that sort of sounding board. And whenever it gets tough, they'll be there to help you. So I think, having a good study partner would really help motivate you.
Yeah, we were talking earlier in the episode, so I live with my course mates, which is a great blessing in times of need. And it does motivate me because they'll be taking the coursework very, very seriously, which will kick me to take my coursework very, very seriously. So to the next question, how did you organise your time when revising to ensure you covered all of the topics that you needed to?
I think for me, what I did was I created sort of a checklist for each module. So a breakdown of all like the main topics within that module, and from there I'd be able to. So from there I can, whenever I've done a topic, I could just sort of tick it off, and that way it became less overwhelming, and it was easy for me to see what I had done. So I think creating a checklist was really ideal for me.
I feel like off the back of that, I found it really helpful to have something visual that sort of showed what Ruqayya just said. So I would put something on my wall. So every time I'd be sat at my desk, I would see the checklist. And there's something quite rewarding about actually ticking it off with a pen rather than doing it online. Obviously, a lot of what we do is now on our computers, but I think there's something quite nice about sort of taking pen to paper and doing a bit old school.
I was quite lucky when I was organising my time, because on both courses I did of my politics undergraduate and my management masters, the topics I had to revise were tied to the weeks of the semester. So I had that tick list already made for me. So I got a kind of a timetable together where I separated mornings and afternoons, 2 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, and then just gave each topic a day, but the morning and afternoon wouldn't be on the same one. And then I do that for 5 days, but I would spread those across the week. So I'd have a couple of days when I wasn't feeling it. I just take that as a rest day rather than trying to say I will work these days if I wasn't feeling it. And then since each topic got a day, I knew that I'd covered them all. That worked really well for me, not ascribing days to things, but kind of time allocations. So it meant that if I was feeling it, I could do it. If I wasn't feeling it, I could just make sure it happened.
Yeah, and a good way to see if you've covered all the topics is to look at past papers. So I was lucky with my course because I had past papers. And in that way, if you were able to do the past paper, you knew you covered all the topics. And if you felt like you were stuck on a past paper, you can then go back and say, oh, I need to go over that topic again. So that way you ensure that you were thoroughly going through all the topics in that module.
So I'm actually going to ask you this question too, because you went to UD too, but also in your everyday life, you have to organise your time. So how do you organise your time to make sure everything gets done?
Yeah, so I'm definitely someone that I need to time block. Otherwise, I will just procrastinate and find other things to do that are far more interesting in that moment, like the washing up. I will decide is the most interesting thing to do rather than what I should be doing. So I time block as well, but I kind of allocate an hour for each task and give myself, we spoke about earlier in the episode about the Pomodoro Technique, and that I found really helpful. If I know that I've got little 5-minute breaks to kind of take a moment, step away from my laptop, that's really helpful as well. And on the back of that, Jemima was talking about a good app that she uses for the Pomodoro Technique. Did you guys use any apps during your revision that helped you?
I remember one app that I used. I don't know what it was called, but like every time you study, like you have like a little garden. Every time you studied, like a tree would be planted. Yeah, that was a really good one. I really like that one.
Yeah.
What was it called? Was it called Forest?
Flora. It's called Flora. So the free version is called Flora. And then there's another one that you pay that's called Forest. But we talked about it earlier in this episode, and that's the app I was using to make my little garden.
Very nice. I use a note-taking app called Notion, which you can link between apps between notes quite easily. So if there were topics that interrelated or even across modules, I could really easily make the connections between my notes, which was a lot easier than if I was making them on paper. So I reckon if you're looking for, this is another question, isn't it, about how we revise and what kind of tips we'd give. But I think that app really helped me with that kind of thing as well.
Notion is amazing. I will also second Notion, not only for revising, but for kind of organising your entire life. I use it for all of my to-do lists. I've got one for the podcast. I've got one for everything. So if anyone's looking for a really good just way of organising your life, Notion is a great one. Although I will say maybe set aside a couple of hours, because I fell down a Notion rabbit hole and spent a good long time making them look pretty. But it is a very good app.
I will also third that Notion is a very great app for organising life in general and making life seem aesthetic as well. Like Soph said, you will spend a couple of hours making it look aesthetic, but it's worth it for the satisfying feeling at the end. So my next question is, how much time should I spend revising my extra reading compared to lecture notes and required reading?
Oh, well, for me, I think it's dependent and subjective on the module, on the course you're in. So with mine, because I did finance and investment and economics as my undergrad, it was all very theory based. And so all of my exams were based on lectures, and the further reading was just for us to consolidate our learning. So for me, it was like 0 time to extra reading and 100% to all the lectures. But I think it's subjective, and I think it's dependent on each course.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think it's very course dependent and also module dependent. When I was doing the politics, it was all about how you use the reading they've given you rather than kind of doing extra reading. If you're one of those top marks, you needed extra reading. It was more about your analysis and your skills there rather than kind of just putting names in. But then on the management masters, I think it was a master's program, you had to find your readings a lot more. So my extra readings were really important because the lecturers weren't giving us quite extensive reading lists. So if I wanted to back anything up, I had to do my own extra reading and make sure I knew where those readings were and what they were saying. So I think it's very, very module and course specific.
I think a key tip that I would give to new students, something I wish I'd done more when I was an undergrad, would be to really utilise the knowledge of your lecturers and your tutors, because they are willing to help and they're there at your disposal. So be emailing them, be asking to meet up, and yeah, just really draw upon their experience, because they know what they're talking about and they'll be able to help you with stuff like this, and knowing, you know, extra reading and whatnot, and they'll be able to help you as well.
Yeah, those are really good tips. And like off the back of what Abbie said, I know in English, you can book up tutorials, which are like 5 to 10 minute meetings every week, and they'll have certain times you can go in and talk to your lecturers about the module. So I know my lecturers open them up during coursework season. And what I found really helpful last year was that one of my lecturers, I told her what I wanted to do, and she gave me like a lot of extra reading and to like go find if I was interested in it, and it really did help. And I used most of it in my coursework because I could have like a lot of development into what I was saying. But it's really good to use your lecturers and tutors, because they can help you so much. But also, like everyone else has said, it depends on your course. So I know for English, a lot of what I do is read. I do enjoy it. But it is good to do my required reading, but also to get the top marks, like James was saying, I needed to find my own research and my own resources. So my next question is, top tips for retaining information. Is it better or easier to use notes on paper or notes online?
I think this is completely up to the individual, and I had a big problem with this, because I think flashcards, well-made flashcards, are beautiful, and I always wanted to have the most beautiful set of flashcards in the whole world. But I realised quite early on that I cannot retain information off flashcards. It does not work for me. It's a pointless exercise. It is a waste of time for me. And that was really difficult, because I wanted to be the person with really pretty flashcards. So I think it's a lot about working out what works for you and completely ignoring what everyone else is doing, because it might not work for you. Even if it looks pretty, if it's not working for you, don't bother, and just work out what works for you and do it. So like I use Notion, I use color-coded linked words and phrases in there. I've got a kind of, you know, all my references are in blue, all my main points are in red, and that works for me. But that might not work for you. So you just need to work out what does work for you and try it. But it's also never too late to try something else. So if you suddenly realise that whatever you're trying to do isn't working for you, just try something else. If it doesn't work, try something else until you get a thing that does work for you.
100%. I agree with James. And I think for me as well, in order to retain information, I found it helpful being able to speak it back to someone else. So if I was able to teach someone else, I knew that I did a good job at retaining all the information. So perhaps having like a study partner or a friend who you can then share the information with, and that would really help with retaining information. And most of it, well, I can't really say for English or those kind of subjects, but if it's a lot of just like recalling a lot of information, it's just practice. If you just keep writing it, that might be helpful as well. So yeah, like James said, it's just subjective. Everyone's different. People are more visual learners. People prefer like listening. So yeah, just finding out what works for you.
Yeah, to really like cement what James just said, I love flashcards, and they personally worked very, very well for me. And sort of bringing in what Ruqayya just said about speaking things out, it is helpful to like externally sort of process it as well, because then you're sort of retaining it as well. So yeah, I love flashcards, but I agree, don't spend too long making them pretty, because it's just another form of procrastination. So yeah, that'd be my tip.
Yeah, those are all great tips. I feel that making your notes look pretty, I desperately wanted to be that girl. I unfortunately found out that I will never be that girl. I will spend 2 hours making my notes look pretty, but I won't actually retain that information. So I realised that working on my laptop and making stuff like organised, like folders, all that jazz was so much better for me and so much quicker, because I had more time to actually absorb the content. As well as that, I found like colloquializing. So say if I had like a plot that I had to remember for a book, just making it into my own words meant I would remember it, and like saying it to your course mates as well, like a study partner, like Ruqayya said, it's a good idea because it means you can externally process and then you can retain that information. So following on from that, what is your favourite thing to reward yourself after a productive day of studying? So what would you like to do in your downtime?
If it's been a full-on intense revision day, it's take a nap, honestly. Just take a nap, just relax. But if it's like, I think mostly it's just having that time out to chill with your friends. Like I found that if I was studying at uni especially, is I'll have like the morning I'll revise a bit, go out for lunch with my mate, come back, and then just sort of just break it up a little bit. So that little bit of like chilling with your friends was like my kind of reward. But I do feel like I wish I did reward myself a lot more. So if that's something I would change, because I think that would just help with that motivation again, just rewarding yourselves just to keep up the stamina, because I feel like you can get so easily overwhelmed and it'll just build up the stress and anxiety. So just if it's just, I don't know, some people might like a little spa treatment for yourself at home, a little face mask or a bubble bath. But yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, I probably agree. And I think often when you've sort of been sat at a desk all day, it's good to do something that's a bit different. So it can be quite easy to just sort of put on Netflix and think you're relaxing, but actually you've just been staring at that screen all day. So I would agree, like getting out, even going on a walk. It can be nice just to sort of get out of the space you've been working in and refresh yourself. And then obviously good food has to be done. Good food. That's what got me through my degree.
I think I completely agree with Abbie's thing about good food. I used to walk down to the shop to buy whatever I was going to do for tea, then just make sure there was something I wanted to eat for tea. Because I was getting the fresh air, I was getting away from the screen, but then I was also kind of going, I'm getting something nice, like buying a packet of donuts or something. Not good every day, but maybe once a week, going buy a nice packet of donuts or something. It worked really well. Just making sure I was getting a clear-cut space, especially when you're advising at home, getting that change in zone. Because from desk to bed isn't really a big enough change I found for me. So I needed to make sure I had a difference, like a change in scenery.
That's all good tips. So I think our main takeaways of how to reward yourself is make sure you take yourself out of your study space, get something that you like. So maybe that's good food, maybe that's good friends, good company, but also make sure you're relaxing. So what is your favourite thing to reward yourself with after like a productive day?
I mean, when I was a student, I also used to work in a corner shop. So I used to see everyone buying their kind of study rewards. So I picked up quickly which were the best ones in the shop I worked in, because it was the ones that were most popular. So definitely, again, on the good food front. But I also used to, I really enjoy watching like travel videos on YouTube. So I would queue myself up a playlist of them. Kind of on my little study breaks, my little 5-minute ones, I kind of have a scroll through and go, oh yeah, I want to watch that. I'd add them all into a playlist, and then at the end of the study day, I would reward myself by looking at wonderful views of Paris and all these other places, and remind myself that was why I was studying hard, was so that I could go on those holidays later on in life. So that was my motivation and a good way to reward myself at the end of the day. But I do agree, getting out of your study space, I definitely didn't do that enough, and have learned from working from home that is actually way more beneficial than a lot of the other stuff I was doing. Get out, stretch your legs, move out of your bedroom.
Yeah, definitely. I think how I reward myself on the good food front is doing like a nice home cooked meal. Usually I'll send my mum a text on what meal she can send me to recreate and just remind myself of home as well. But also on the getting out the doors, I feel like when I go to training after like a really hard study day, I feel really rewarded because my body's getting exercise, but also the social element of meeting my teammates as well. And like, even though you're in a slump before, you don't want to exercise, you're like, I've been sitting down all day, so I'm going to my bed. It's just really good to get out and like stretch your legs. But also as well, like Ruqayya said, I am an advocate for a good nap. A good nap does make the world go round. So then our next question on the flip side is, how do you combat stress and exam anxiety?
So one thing I found when it came to exam anxiety and when it came closer to the exam day, I always just started second guessing myself. And like I knew the information, but I'd be like, oh, I think I've forgotten this. And then when I realized, is just have confidence in yourself. Because you've gotten yourself this far, and if you're like a first year student, like you've gotten yourself into uni, you can do it, and just having that little bit of confidence, like especially before the exam. I remember when you're waiting to go into that exam hall, and everyone's just sort of like exchanging sort of information, and that's when I used to get the most sort of overwhelmed, and I just sort of had to just distance myself, and just sort of like have that confidence. And that's why I never used to take my notes with me or like on the day to the exam, because I feel like I would start getting overwhelmed. So yeah, I think a good tip is to have confidence in yourself.
And I would say like it's really important to just stick in your own lane. So as easy as it can be, like Ruqayya said, to sort of want to know if other people have revised harder, or like take comfort knowing that someone's not really revised, just focus on yourself, because all you're doing is losing energy by thinking about if someone else has done more than you. And my second tip would be, it can be really hard, and like obviously sometimes it's not possible, but where it is, like try and take the night off before the exam, like just chill, fully relax, don't have any plans, just take time to almost let your brain sort of rest, because all the information is there, like Ruqayya said, and in the morning it will, you'll just be fresher and your mind will be clearer.
Completely agree on the exams. Try and get that kind of space from everyone else before the exam. Make sure you're coming through well rested. And I think on assignments, the way I used to submit, not essay plans, but kind of have a chat with who was going to mark it before I kind of did loads of work on it to see if I was in the right direction. Because I knew that when I did come to start working on my plan and my kind of content and everything, I knew that they'd kind of gone, yeah, you're on the right track. And that meant that I had quite a good confidence in myself. Then also, again, just I think there's definitely some people really benefit from working with a study partner. I cannot cope if I've got someone else telling me about how they're getting on with it, because I just can't second guess myself. And I'm kind of like, you submitted it a month before. I'm not thinking about it until a fortnight before. So it's just kind of working out, getting the right person you could talk to and kind of journey along through the task with, because otherwise you're just going to be kind of getting really stressed because they're ahead of you or behind you or not where you are or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's all really good ways to combat stress and exam anxiety. I personally used to have like a routine in the mornings, a morning routine. So wake up, I'd have my hype playlist on because I feel like good music will put me in a good mood to do well, and then eat a really good breakfast. I'm prone to forget about breakfast a lot of the time. But on like exam days or days like I'm handling coursework or doing like a heavy study day, I make sure it's important to have like a good breakfast and a banana because they're really good for you. And then make sure, like Ruqayya is saying, I usually, like when we're back in school when we had exams, I would never speak to anyone before my exam. I don't want to know about you, don't know about what you're doing. Unless you're asking me what I'm doing after this exam, I don't want to know anything about your exam. And I found that was really good because it meant I wasn't stressed with everyone else, like Abbie said. I was focusing on myself and like what I learned. And also when you cram yourself with all the knowledge before, it feels like it will just leave your head as soon as you walk into the exam hall. So have a good rest and just focus on yourself and know that you can do it as well. So our final question is, what is your favourite study space on campus?
I'm a big advocate for the library. I only fully utilised it in my final year, but I wish I'd done it sooner because it just meant that I could leave my house at 9 a.m, spend the day in the library, and because it was such a trek, like you wouldn't bother just going back and forth, you'd stay there, and then by the time you went home, you knew that you'd earned it because you'd been sat in there all day. So I would highly recommend utilising the library. There's so many different like spaces, there's silent study space, computer areas, like anything you need, there's a space for everyone. So I highly recommend the library.
So I was different because I couldn't do the library. I found that because I was in the business building, I was really comfortable in the business building, and I felt like there weren't too many students in there as well. So it's just the Sir Richard Morris building, and I used to go into one of the computer rooms if it was free. And if that wasn't free, there was like this sort of like seating area, and I just used to sit there, and it was just so nice because there was hardly anyone there. I could just do my own thing and just bang out a whole day of revision.
I've never revised or worked on campus because I did my master's here during the pandemic and I lived off-site. But I can tell you what I did for my undergrad. And I used to really like working in the cafes because they were always busy. There was always like a kind of chatter around me. So I felt like I was with people. But then because I can't work with other people, it meant that I wasn't actually having to talk to anyone. So I had company, but not company. And that worked really well for me.
That's a range of spaces. Like Ruqayya, I can't do the library. It's a beautiful building, and I think everyone who is in there does amazing work in there. But I hate utter silence, and I feel like when you're in the library, you're supposed to be quiet, which is actually the point. But I can't do it. But I do love Martin Hall breakout space, which is where a lot of English is. And I found like all my course mates, we always just like before lectures, in between lectures, or like on a good productive study day, we're always in Martin Hall because it's nearby most of our houses because it's on the edge of campus. But also at the same time, it's just a really nice space, and like you're with your course mates. If I have a question, we're surrounded by our lecturers' offices, so I can just knock if I need. So it's very like helpful. But it has like a lot of sentiment to me for first year. I did spend endless nights in there finishing work, but it is a good space, I'd say. So what about you? What's your favourite space to do work?
Well, I also didn't study at this university, but I can say that I was a big advocate for the library. But when the library was too quiet, because I also understand that there are times where it just feels like I can hear my own brain buzzing, I would then move into the Students' Union because it's slightly more relaxed, similar to James. There's like a bit of chatter about, but it's not too distracting. And I think that has now translated into my working life. I work in an office that is quite loud and busy, and that has been massively helpful, kind of training myself to not just like utter silence, because now I can work effectively when there's conversations going around me.
So thank you guys so much for coming here today and answering and giving us all your tips and tricks for exam season. Is there any last comments anyone has for the new exam season approaching?
No, I suppose because there's differences in kind of, there's a bit, your exam might be in person, it might not be in person. It's kind of, this is your first exam online. Just make it get a really good grasping about what you need to do to partake in the exam. If you need to, if you need to log in 3/4 of an hour beforehand, if you log in 1/4 of an hour beforehand, if you need to submit within whatever, just really have a good grasping, because those kind of details are what can really stress you out. They're also the easiest things to deal with.
And I think obviously work very hard and like reach your deadlines, but also have a good time and do use the resources, because look on the website because there's so much and a lot of it I didn't know was there when I was a student. So I'd recommend just having a little browse and seeing what takes your fancy. Thank
you so much again, guys, for joining us today, and it's been great to hear about your exam tips for exam season in Loughborough and in university in general. So don't forget, you can subscribe to Let's Talk Loughborough in all streaming platforms, or you can watch the podcast on the Loughborough University YouTube channel. So thank you for listening, and make sure you watch out on the Instagram so you can ask us any questions for future podcast episodes with us. Goodbye.
Bye. And now one of our university chaplains is going to take you through a short relaxation technique.
So this is a reflection on being calm. So let's just sit comfortably wherever you are, just rested. Let's not hold anything just for the moment. Let's be free. Just going to do a little relaxation of the body. I relax my head and my face. Move through to my neck and shoulders. Let them become loose and relaxed. Arms relaxed, hands gently rested on your lap. Be free, don't hold anything now. It's a few moments for you to experience calm. Move through to your legs, knees, ankles. Relax relax. Feet and toes, let them become loose and relaxed. So I move away from the physical body and I come to my mind. Just become aware of your breath right now. And breathe in for 2. And as you breathe out, think, I am calm. Breathe in for 2. 1, 2. Breathe out, I am calm. Breathe in for 2. Breathe out, I am present. Breathe in for 2. Breathe out, I am present. Breathe in for 2. Breathe out, I am peace. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, I am peace. So now be aware of what's going on in my mind. Just observe my thoughts, the train of my thinking. Am I agitated, unsettled, a little disturbed? Just observe it. Watch your mind. And whatever is happening, it does not matter. I see it. Then I create the thought. I am calm. Maybe a bit of resistance, but don't buy into the agitation, the worry, the stress. Observe it, see it for what it is. I am much more than this. I am calm. It's okay. I see the tension maybe in my body. I feel the tension in my mind. I watch it. But it's not me. I'm so much more than that. And I create the thought. I am positive. I am free to create any thought I want. And I choose peace, calm. I am peace. I gently create these thoughts in my mind, and these feelings will calm me down. I'm okay. I'm doing the best I can right now. Feel that, experience that, and observe yourself and your mind slowly calming down, feeling a sense of well-being, feeling in the moment, feeling back in control. I am calm. I am peace. I'm okay. Doing the best I can right now.